Hi, people. So welcome to the live stream. As always, I'm just going to see how this goes. It's always dependent on the interaction from subscribers, but I do enjoy these live streams. I think they're a good opportunity to engage in a way that I can't always engage with comments. Um, so yes, if you're online, say hello, ask questions, and that's how we get this thing rolling. Otherwise, I'm going to multitask. I've got lots of newspapers to get through because it's check this out. This is recent days, so I've all of these to get through. Anyway, right, I'm talking to myself at the moment because there's no one online. So I'll see how this goes. Yeah. If you happen to, yeah, see how it goes. If anyone's online, please do say hello. Let me know you're here. Ask questions and so on. That's how we get this thing going. Um, and ideally, you need a few people to really have a proper live stream. Okay, I'll just stand by. I'm going to read my newspaper and I'll look out for comments. I'm not going to do running commentary because otherwise I'm just talking to myself, so that's a bit pointless. Right. Like I said, if you're online, please do say hello, and that's the best way to do this. Difficult to find a time when everyone's free, so that's why I do these live streams periodically without any set sort of time. I'm going to play a game on my phone, actually, a zombie shoot 'em up game. It's always fun. Just one so far. I'm not sure if that's myself or someone else. I think what should happen is subscribers should get a notification when I do this. I'm not quite sure how it works. If you see some smoke, by the way, that's incense. Find it relaxing. Carl, hello, welcome to the channel. Good. Have you heard about Ted Kaczynski and Green Anarchists and Neo Luddites? Yeah, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Um, it's interesting. Welcome, by the way. You're my first person in. Yeah, I have a Time magazine special from 1996, and it features him. I don't know a huge amount about the case. I know he was sort of a green anarchist, and it was a prolonged campaign lasting several decades. But I think he was behind the 1996 Atlanta Olympics bombing. Um, and he did kill a few people. I think he's serving a life sentence at the moment. Green anarchists, neo Luddites. I've heard of this crossover. There was a thing on Vice News recently about a crossover between neo Nazis and the Green Movement. And part of this is because some neo Nazi types, they're very interested in sort of getting back to pre industrial paganism. And that's their strange crossover into environmentalism. Neo Luddites, I imagine that's the same thing. Have you been watching something about those subjects recently, Carl? I'll just multitask here whilst maybe it takes a few seconds for the comment to appear, so just excuse me while I multitask. Playing a zombie shoot 'em up game on my phone here, which is fun. Just wondering why you raised the question. Well, it's a good question, but have you been watching something about the subject or? The live stream should be, the comments should be open. So if you have any technical difficulty, people let me know. But I think I've enabled all the comments. So three people now. Welcome, welcome to whoever's just come in. Please do stay, Paul. And we're live. Yes, we are. The best way this works, guys, is interaction. So please, like Carl did, ask questions. That's the best way. Sorry, I'm multitasking here, playing a zombie shoot 'em up game. So if I die, it's on your hands, guys. Yeah. But seriously, that is the best way to get this rolling. As Martin Tyler of Sky would say, Martin Tyler. I must admit, I don't know if you're talking about Sky News. I don't know that name. Is he a newsman? Martin Tyler? I must admit, I don't know the name. I don't watch Sky that often. I probably watch the Beeb more. I don't mind Sky though. I think it's decent. Yes, I've watched a couple of videos about him. One from Count Duckula. Yeah, he covers. I've seen of his. I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan of Count Duckula, but he covers a few interesting videos on real crime and stuff like that. I have watched a few of them. Kyung Min, welcome. Random question, but would you rather teach English in Taiwan or South Korea? I recall you taught in China before. That's a good question. Honestly, I get a good vibe from both places. I haven't been to either. I had a friend who's taught in South Korea, and he shared notes. He taught in a kindergarten there. He didn't have a good experience, but that's because I think he had certain expectations about the running of it. He felt they were a little bit lax. Obviously, that was his experience. I think the culture in South Korea and Taiwan is similar, from what I gather. They have a similar work culture. Um, Obviously, Taiwan is not the PRC. It's a democracy. It's a more free society. So that would be the obvious difference. Here's the thing, um, Kyung Min, going by your name, I assume you're Korean. Um, do you know not much about the teaching culture there? But yeah, I mean, I'd love to visit South Korea. It's a country that I get a good impression from, but just opportunity and money isn't on side. The other thing about, I'm trying to basically get my love life going. And the thing about being in a relationship, some sacrifice involved. If you work abroad for 6 months or a year, it's sacrifice. I mean, those times I taught in China were fantastic. Leaving aside the politics of it, leaving aside the restrictions, in terms of just the human experience of it, it was wonderful. And the school I worked in was great. The teachers were very helpful. So, as much as I have contempt for the Chinese government, I have to admit the experience was wonderful, and I'm so grateful that I done it. It did enrich my life, definitely. Um, but are you a teacher, Kyung? Have you got experience in that background? And I just wonder, why are you asking between Taiwan and South Korea? Have you had experience in both locations? Or it's a good question though. But yeah, to answer it, I did consider maybe teaching in Japan or South Korea or Taiwan. One thing though, I never actually graduated from university, and teaching in China, that's not a mandatory requirement. I mean, I have the criteria, and I know I'm a good teacher. I just didn't graduate. But I have the TEFL, TESOL, and so on. Japan, I know they're a bit stricter about being a university graduate. Hi, Declan, welcome. Let's see. I'm not really a fan of him either, but I've watched some of his videos as well. Yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm not saying I dislike the guy. I just think I know he has this Mad Lads series, which is an interesting choice of title. But I mean, he covers interesting content. He does. He had one recently on the Canadian Biker War. He had one. I think it was specifically in Quebec. Actually, he does cover some interesting stuff on true crime, and that's sort of stuff I do occasionally watch. So, um, but I think my only contention with him is he's sort of a controversialist for the sake of it. I don't know. I mean, at the time when he was censored by for his that notorious dog salute thing, I took his side. I thought it was overblown, but I don't know. I think sometimes he likes to shake things up a little bit, which has its place. But I don't know. I'm not going to say too much about him because I don't know really enough about him. But he does have some interesting content. In terms of channels I follow, actually, there's one called Bedtime Stories. I haven't watched those guys for a while, but they cover sort of paranormal, curious things. I'm going to turn my phone off to save energy. And that's a channel I recommend. It's not for children, um, but the artwork is fantastic. If you're into boxing, Rainy Day Boxing is good. Too many boxing channels online are just irritating. They're just noisy. It's just lots of trash talk. But these videos like Rainy Day Boxing are fantastic. I don't know if you any of you guys follow boxing, but Ernie Shavers passed away recently, considered by many the single hardest puncher in boxing history. Okay, let's see. I'm okay, Declan. I'm okay. I've had a few difficult experiences recently. I joined Tinder recently. I can tell you guys about that in a minute, but I'm getting by. I'm getting by. I hope you're well. Yes, it's very hard working in South Korea, although I feel it's getting better these days. I'm Kyopo, Korean born abroad, want to teach abroad. I must admit, I haven't heard that term before. I've heard BBC British born Chinese, but I haven't heard that. I assume that's a Korean word, Kyopo. Now I know. Are you in the UK, Kyung, or in the United States or another country? Um, and if you don't mind me asking, that means so you have Korean parents, but you were born in the West, or um, yeah, I assume that's what you mean. I want to teach abroad. What I would say, if you're in the UK, if you're ethnically Korean, that is definitely a big advantage because I knew a guy who was Chinese. He was British Chinese, but I know he's had a lot of work in China. Although having said that, I know in China there's actually a prejudice insofar as they expect English teachers basically, to put this candidly, they expect English teachers to basically be white Westerners. So I know that, for example, African American people, they might be great teachers, but they find it a little bit harder to get placed simply because of that prejudice. So you might actually find being Korean, ironically, even though you obviously speak English, could actually be a challenge. I don't know. Certainly, I'd encourage you. It was a great experience. But if you're in the UK, if you can, take the TEFL UK course. It isn't cheap. I think it's about 180. I forget what I paid, but it was good. It was very intensive. It was very helpful. Um, the jobs market in this country isn't too bad actually at the moment, but I'd always encourage anyone to get into this sort of teaching. It's very rewarding. Obviously, it varies country to country. I can only speak about China. I haven't taught in any other country, even in the UK. I'd done a bit of exam invigilation, but that was it. But I definitely encourage you. Have you taught before? I mean, do you come from a teaching background, or is it just something that you think you'd be interested in? Um, yes, pretty good, thank you. Is that a dating website? Tinder, yeah, it is. And I have to tell you guys, if you're interested in this, I've been there for 3 days. I'm already thinking about quitting. It's free, so at least I'm not losing anything. But honestly, I wasn't going to mention this in the live stream. I was going to do. I'll probably still do a video in its own right, but yeah, I just find it very vacuous and shallow. I mean, I don't want to come across as judgmental here, but a lot of women there are just, I don't know, it's all sex, 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 and I'm as red blooded as the next man, but it's a bit, I am looking for something more, and it's just a bit vacuous. Also, again, this is just personal taste. I don't know what it is with young women nowadays, but the number of women on that site who want to look like the Kardashians, or who cover themselves in tattoos. Now, this is just a personal thing. I apologize if any of you guys have tattoos. Personally, I don't like it, especially not on a woman, not head to toe. It's not. I'm not a fan of it. Each to their own, body sovereignty and all that. But yeah, I don't know what it is. Beautiful young women covering their arms and their faces with ink. It's just the thing is, it's permanent, right? That might work when you're 25 or 35, but 65, I don't know. It's to me, it's not a turn on at all. Um, but yeah, Tinder, the whole principle is you basically swipe, and it's kind of shallow and just I don't know. I don't get a good impression from it. I'm certainly not expecting to find. I did speak to one Thai girl very briefly, and then she just disappeared because she said something that contradicted what she said in her profile, and I raised that, and I guess she didn't like me calling it out. So she said that she was a fashion designer. So I said that, oh, right, you're a fashion designer. And she said, no. And I said, oh, but it said on your profile, and she just disappears. Very strange. But yeah, I'd be cautious about Tinder. It is free. I guess that's one good thing. You know, if you the way it works is you match up with people, and if you do, you can send messages. But I wouldn't get too excited about it. Even though I had a bad experience on eHarmony, I think the overall quality is definitely better on eHarmony. How do you feel about online alpha males? I imagine you have that guy Andrew Tate in mind, Alan. Uh, I have very mixed opinions on them. I decided to check out that guy Andrew Tate, or at least some material that is still available online. He, of course, has been censored now by YouTube and I think Twitter as well. I've very mixed opinions on him. I mean, this again is a very important subject because we hear about toxic masculinity coming from feminists. I actually do think there is such a thing, but not necessarily in the way that they do. I think it is in the form of gangs and the fact that some teenage boys seem to think that it makes them a tough guy to be in a gang. Um, but in terms of alpha males, to use the American vernacular, chads, I don't know. It's not me. I'm not. I wouldn't call myself a. You know, I'm quite traditional in many ways. Like in a relationship, I like feminine women. I'm a masculine man. I follow boxing. I don't know. It's an interesting one. It's an interesting question, and I think an important question. I don't have anything against them in principle. Where my issue lies is when they run other guys down. What I'm talking about is if we look in Western society, and I've made videos about this, there's enormous pressure on young people and anyone for that matter, for example, to have had sexual experience. Now, if you have a group of guys, let's say in a pub situation, and one of them has had less experience than the others, you could be sure the others will take the piss. They'll call him the virgin and all the rest of it. Now, there's a paradox here. We talk about the need for young men to open up about mental health, yet other men don't necessarily help. And I'm thinking of those alpha males. The fact that they think discussing feelings and so on is a weakness. It's that's ridiculous. So certainly some other positions can be quite obnoxious. Andrew Tate, some of it, I mean, he said, the answer for depression is to say to hell with it. It's all psychological. So if you disregard it, then it goes away. That's nonsense. And it shows he's quite ignorant about that subject. Having said that, I've watched a few of his clips. I mean, he's very much like, oh, I'm a rich guy. And if you're, this is how you do it. I'm a little bit skeptical of life coaches in general because it's a little bit idealistic. You see them all over YouTube, like, oh, this is what you need to do if you want this, or this is what you need to do if you want that. I'm not saying that there's nothing there. I'm just saying it's a bit idealistic. Carl, even if they make some good points, I think that green anarchism and neo-Luddites are just bad ideologies. The views on technology are just mad and destructive, and it does concern me. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I don't know quite enough about them to comment in great detail, but as a general point, I'm wary of anarchism. because I think it goes against human nature. Human society has evolved. Sorry, I'm changing the subject here. Um, I'm going to come back to that alpha male thing because I think it's a good question. But I think anarchism in general, it goes against human nature because societies have always organized themselves. Since we go back to the Sumerians, ancient imperial China, the Egyptians, there's always been some form of organization, some good, some bad, but it's always been there. I think the only way anarchism can really work is in very small pockets. There's a place in Copenhagen, I believe, called Christiania, which has sort of experimented with it. But even if you have 100 people and they're anarchists and they say, okay, we've got no leader, we've got very limited laws. What happens when one of them decides to, okay, well, I could do what I want, so I'm going to steal from my neighbor? Or I like my neighbor's wife, so I'm going to sleep with her, and to hell with the consequences. Then you're going to have tensions, you're going to have potential violence. Now, then, someone in that community is inevitably going to have to put themselves into leadership roles saying, no, you can't do this. You can't hurt the rest of us. So that's leadership, that's structure. So I think anarchism is very, very naive. I understand where it comes from, this idea that political ideologies always promise but don't deliver, and among many other things. But I am wary of anarchism. And I think that groups like Black Lives Matter and so on that want to totally disband the police are incredibly foolish. Um, let's see, I'm just trying to keep up with the different. So, Aaron, you're addressing the point about alpha males. With Andrew Tate, I'm torn. On a personal level, I instinctively dislike him as he portrays a caricature of masculinity as seen by a 14-year-old boy. I totally agree with that. He's not doing alpha males any favors because he puts on this sort of hyper macho thing. Like, look at me, I was a mixed martial arts fighter, I'm a rich guy. He is successful. I don't think we could deny that, but is it the right sort of success? I mean, he recently addressed this. I saw one video where he said, "Well, young men are encouraged to speak up about mental health, and I'm just trying to help them, and I'm being vilified." However, some of the things he says in his obnoxious manner, he is on the money. I have to agree with that. I mean, he made a point about patriarchy, and the video is entitled, I think it's still up, where he's debating with this male feminist, right? And he was saying that every society in history, without question, without exception, has had a patriarchy. Every successful society in history has been a patriarchy. We can go back to the martial worlds of the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks, the Persians, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, um, the British Empire, every empire for that matter, the Mongols, um, wherever the Soviet Union, wherever there has been power in the history of the world, it's involved male power, patriarchy. There has been powerful women. We've had certainly in this country, Thatcher, May, and now Truss. There's been Indira Gandhi, Golda Meir, Catherine the Great in Russia. There have been powerful women, but those are more exceptions than rules. So I think he's right about that. But as you say, his delivery is very immature and it's artificial. He's sort of like a male Kardashian in that sense. It seems very superficial. I think he would make a stronger case, and guys like him would make a stronger case if they were a little bit more mature in the way they went about it. Um, but it's a little bit like I've got mine, so you can get yours as well. And it's the way he demeans other guys who doesn't quite fit his. Having said that, the debate he had with a male feminist, I have to say he came out stronger. The male feminist was very much saying it's all about feelings. Well, feelings matter, of course they do. But if you see the debate, it was very much like, I mean, put it this way: if you have a country invaded, and I do agree with this, if a country is invaded, who is it that society looks to? Men. Look at Ukraine. Look at the invasion of Ukraine. All fighting age Ukrainian men were immediately mobilized. So I don't think we can escape from this. Um, Feminists can denounce patriarchy, but more often than not, patriarchy has protected women, actually. Maybe that's a controversial statement. I don't know if there's any female subscribers here. Please have your say. But This is why Will Noland, when he made the patriarchy lecture, I think he again hit some very good points. If you have, here's another dynamic: you have a group of 10 people, let's say 9 guys and 1 woman. You can be absolutely sure in any sort of confrontation, the men in that group are going to be protective of the woman every time. So there is something I think deeply embedded in the human psyche which does have more traditional gender roles. But this doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with women being police officers or getting in martial arts or anything like that. I believe in equal opportunity, but I think it's naive to pretend that gender is a social construct. I think that's naive and just wrong. Let's see. Sorry, I'll scroll up, guys. I'm just trying to. Yeah, however, some of the things he says in his obnoxious manner, he is on the money. I just wish he delivered it a bit better because, as you say, he plays up to a stereotype. Declan, her trust is planning to freeze energy prices. Yeah, I mean, that's good, but I think she's only doing it from pressure from backbenchers and to catch up with Starmer. My big issue with this trust is her reluctance to have a windfall tax. Here's the thing, that's not just a socialist lefty argument. I heard a billionaire yesterday, financial analyst, and he was personally a billionaire, saying as a one-off it was justified, and he himself was a billionaire. I mean, I don't think there's any. She's saying that it would put off investment, but the German economy seems to be doing quite well, and they have a windfall tax. I just think this is typical Toryism, protecting the rich and the powerful. And I think there's going to be growing public animosity over these energy companies, much as there was against the bankers in the early 2010s. Okay, this is good, guys. We're getting a lot of comments coming through. I'm going to try and keep ahead of them. Hi, Toxic. Welcome. Okay, one thing I have with alpha males is that they kind of feed into the whole toxic masculinity stereotype that feminists talk about. Absolutely, I totally agree with you on that. I mean, they basically give feminists what they want in terms of. I wouldn't say Will Nolan was in that category. There, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He was a lecturer at Eton College. Now he didn't come across as sort of really aggressive, but he made some very important points. The problem with Andrew Tate is he comes across just as the feminists want to portray toxic masculinity. Also, we have to say it. Some of his attitude to sex and that whole thing is problematic in the sense that he has said things. I mean, I don't think he's outright condoned rape, but his attitude towards mistreatment of women is questionable. And I have to say, I haven't seen that much, but the little I have seen is it's not good. Um, there is a thing with young men. It has to be said that treats women badly. I mean, look at the whole world of rap and drill music. It's toxic, in my opinion, and it does treat women very badly. Having said that, a lot of people have questioned. Well, wait a second. He's being censored for toxic masculinity. Look at someone like Cardi B, Nicki Minaj. In my opinion, sorry for any fans out there, but in my opinion, it's just trash. I mean, what sort of message does that send out to young women? That if you basically you swear like a sailor, you are slutty, you're just you can't say that even because they're empowered women. It's BS in my opinion. It's just the whole culture to me is really vacuous. I've no time for it. But you're right, Alan. These alpha male types, they do feed into the stereotype, and that's why what I would say is good guys need to reclaim masculinity because actually toxic males are part of the problem. So are male feminists who want to denounce it completely. Like I say, if a country's invaded, it's men who are looked to. I think there's such a thing as positive masculinity. You know, that's not an exact science, it's not an exact definition, but basically I can figure some people I have enormous admiration for. The Klitschko brothers, former world heavyweight boxers, they're strong men, right? Those guys really are the sort of people I have in mind when it comes to positive masculinity. The role models, they don't abuse people weaker than themselves. Yeah. So there is a certain positive masculinity. The problem is feminists and male feminists think that all masculinity is bad. That's where they're wrong. Anyway, it's a very interesting subject. I'm sure there's a lot more to say about that. Um, like the whole opposition to men showing emotions, for example. Yeah, exactly. That's one of their biggest flaws. Piers Morgan came out with this a while back, where he was claiming that depression is overblown, and he was criticizing that young gymnast Simone Biles for coming back. You know, mental health and depression, although society has been more open on this recently, I think things have improved. It is true that men still find it difficult. I've tried to break the stigma by talking about these things in my channel. Tyson Fury has, actually, the boxer. I give him credit for that, although he's not my favorite person in the world. I do give him credit for that. Um, so the whole thing about not showing feelings, some women have that attitude, like they don't like men who show feelings, but it is also largely a male domain, and perhaps is one of the negative aspects of patriarchy. And it's something that has been around for a very, very long time. I mean, in the First World War, soldiers who suffered shell shock were shot for cowardice. Attitudes only slightly improved in the Second World War. Again, you know, there is that side of it where there's a lack of empathy, where any sense of and I've seen this in male circles. I've seen this sort of attitude whereby a guy is complaining about something and he's just silences, oh, stop whining, stop. But maybe it's a legitimate thing, and surely being assertive and standing up for ourselves is the whole essence of self-respect. But it's an interesting subject, and there's a lot to say about it. It's worth a video in its own right. um Once it comes to a certain point, the CCP is dissolved. I would love to see some of the Chinese people scrutinizing the Wuhan Institute of Virology and expose their actions to the world. I'd love to see that too. Interestingly, I was looking at bioterrorism article on Wikipedia, and COVID-19 did happen to show up in the category A section. That's interesting. I haven't seen that article. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's wishful thinking in the moment. The CCP continues to have an iron grip on power. With the passing of Mikhail Gorbachev recently, there's been a lot of talk in China. Um, well, actually, the CCP, their analysis of him was this shows why single party regime shouldn't open up. They present Gorbachev as a great failure. The tragedy of Glasnost and Perestroika, Gorbachev's great programs, where they were never fully realized. I mean, the truth is, in the 90s, Russia did see a rise in crime and corruption. This was associated with Gorbachev and Yeltsin. Um, there's a lot to say about that, but I think unfortunately the CCP continues to have an iron grip on power. There's been a big earthquake actually in China in the last few days. Dozens have been killed. That would be an example, since a major 2008 Sichuan earthquake, have invested money into stronger infrastructure. Um, okay, I'll just keep scrolling down because there's a lot to cover here. This is the sort of live stream I appreciate having feedback. Carl, in his video count, Dankula, what is his name? Is it Dunkula? I think it's Count Dankula, isn't it? Said that he agrees with Ted Kaczynski's views on technology in his manifesto. That's interesting. But Ted Kaczynski was basically a terrorist. So I think we always need to be a bit cautious about endorsing the views of terrorists, even though often it's no excuse, but often people are radicalized when they feel ignored. Uh, but I don't know quite enough about the subject of green anarchism to comment in detail. Hi, Nathan. You've said that Truss was an okay foreign secretary. You're responding to the comment I made earlier. But seriously, what do you think they were thinking when they chose her? We need a statesman woman. Sunak at least had that potential. Yeah, I mean, my gut feeling was, although I didn't like all of Sunak's positions, my gut feeling, I would have preferred him. I think he was more on board, ironically, given all the snides about him being a millionaire. I think he was actually more assertive on public opinion with the corporations. I think neither of them were ideal. I think the Tories should have went with an outsider like Tom Tugendhat, maybe Kimi Badenoch. The problem they had was a limited, well, no cabinet experience, especially Tugendhat. Um, but just to clarify that point in Truss as a foreign secretary, she did get trade deals with Japan and Australia, and she has been consistently robust with China and Russia. Now, some people say that's a lack of diplomacy, but the truth is, especially with China, we've been pandering for far too long. Maybe it is time for some plain speaking. But having said that, I do understand your concerns with Truss. I don't like her attitude to windfall tax, and you know, her delivery this time is just strange. She has a strange communication method, and I'm not talking about the fact she's not, by her own admission, the flashiest person around. She's not. She's not Boris Johnson in that sense. Um, she doesn't have that sort of folksy rapport, but she did manage to get the Tory members' votes somehow. But sometimes, she's almost like, dare I say it, an adult version of Greta Thunberg in her mannerisms. It's a little bit strange. But it's day one. Let's give her a chance. She might only last 2 years anyway if Starmer wins the general election. But yeah, I do agree. She wasn't the best choice, but I think Penny Mordaunt would have been better. I think Sunak would have been better. But that's what we've got. Um, Yeah, we'll see what happens. I do think taking a more assertive line with Russia and China is good, and I do think she will. Probably because she knows we are heading for recession too. Yeah. Aaron, I think Tate's popularity with young men is because he points out how society looks down on young men and mistreats them in a certain way. Is isn't a portrait of hatred of women, as a lot of people said who celebrated when Tate was censored. Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest, I really didn't know the guy that well when it happened, so I thought I'd check him out. Um, like I say, what I saw, I had very mixed opinions. I don't like his delivery. I don't like. I I think his points would be carried stronger if he was a little bit more. It's kind of this very self. He's very vain. I mean, he comes across as very vain and very sort of self righteous and sort of I am powerful and successful and wealthy. Be like me. It's a little bit like he comes across as a bit of a salesman. That's my main issue with him. Um, but I agree. I think misogynist is one of those terms that gets absolutely thrown around. I mean, I saw this ridiculous article in the Eye a few days ago where the writer was saying she was a black woman and she was saying, "Oh, there's undertones of misogyny and racism to the criticism of Meghan Markle." I'm so tired of these loaded terms being thrown around. Misogyny means hatred of women and girls. That's what the word means. So, yet we see it just thrown around and weaponized. Having said that, I do think some of his attitudes to women are questionable. So I wouldn't give him a total free pass on that. Um, and the fact that he's popular with young men, some of his attitudes are are rightly controversial. So it's again not something I would totally celebrate. I wouldn't say that Andrew Tate is a worse role model than some of the rappers out there. I mean, when young men look up to these basically thugs, as far as I'm concerned, that's not a good sign for society. And I do think the world of drill and rap is toxic, most of it. There's a few outliers, but anyway. On the subject of anti vaxxers and nutty conspiracy theories, um, so I'm just trying to keep up with all the comments. An issue that riles me is that most people think vaccines cause autism. It's almost like most people have taken into nutty conspiracy theories too much to the point responsibility and common sense is butchered. Absolutely. Piers Morgan is now back in the form of Piers Morgan Uncensored. The best part is, unlike Good Morning Britain, he is allowing comments on what you think Piers Morgan, on what you want Piers Morgan to talk about. Yeah, I think one of the biggest contentions for Piers Morgan is not his opinions. I mean, he's very much pitched himself as, he's quite populist, he's anti woke, but it's very much, and I think this is very cynical. The studios that have employed him have very much pitched to the fact that he's a controversialist, but he is combative. That he's sort of our shock jock equivalent of Glenn Beck or one of those American the late Rush Limbaugh. Although I think he's quite smart. I don't think Piers Morgan's a fool. But I think one of the most contentious things was the fact that he would have people on his shows and he'd keep cutting through them. In that sense, he came across as very obnoxious. And of course, he had a tantrum that time when he stormed off. For me, I actually agree with a lot of Piers Morgan's positions. It's just he comes across as so full of it and so arrogant. Um, I mean, he actually had an advertisement about his new show, and he had the advertisement showed him pointing to the complaints department. In other words, he knows people are going to complain. But unfortunately, it's the cynical age we live in where that sort of thing sells. I mean, it's Piers Morgan will disagree with someone just for the sake of an argument, even if he doesn't really disagree with them, and that's quite cynical. But yeah, if he's allowing comments, if he's allowing dissent, that's very important because he's very powerful. I mean, he's one of the most famous people in the country. He's one of the top journalists in the country. If we want to call him that, he's become really a celebrity recently. I did manage to make a comment on Piers Morgan's very first video of him reacting to himself walking off of Good Morning Britain. That's interesting. I wonder what they said he couldn't have been more tactful in terms of not believing Meghan Markle. So he had no, I didn't see that. Did he have any sense of embarrassment or, oh, I shouldn't have done that? Hopefully he realizes his mistakes and you're free to let me know your thoughts on his new channel on YouTube. I don't know how much time I'll be dedicating to that because honestly, Morgan gets on my nerves at times. I do think he's very arrogant, and unfortunately, it's one of these examples. Andrew Tate's the same. They have good points. They actually carry some strong opinions. I mean, some very valid points, but it gets overshadowed by their arrogance and their vanity, um, because it can blind people to that. You know, people could be focusing on that personality side rather than what they're actually saying. Whilst I also commend him on standing up to the gun issue, I too have mixed feelings with Piers. At the time of the outrageous insurrection of January the 6th last year, I did also commend him for speaking out against Donald Trump, but during his more recent interview with him, he all of a sudden went soft. This is one of the biggest problems with Piers Morgan. I don't think he has conviction. I don't think he has conviction. He's been praising Trump for years. Only recently, like last maybe 1 or 2 years, has he sort of doubled down a bit. Like he'll condemn his statements. Trump is, in my opinion, a demagogue. I think he's a disgrace. I think he's undemocratic. I am not a fan of Trump. But Piers Morgan flip flops. I mean, yeah, he stood up to the gun lobby and he said important things. At times he's shown courage in doing so. But he's very inconsistent, and I don't know what Piers Morgan actually believes. I really do think he will say anything for ratings. I believe that. I'm very cynical. Um, I mean, he's made this thing about being friends with Trump. Eventually, he's, kind of. There's a lot of people who pander to Trump. Nigel Farage is another one. I had that issue with Douglas Murray, the commentator, for a while, although he's moderated a bit recently. But too many right wingers who actually talk a lot of sense when it comes to woke politics. They're far, far too enabling of Donald Trump. Um, he was not only soft on him, he also shook his hand at the end. I was very disappointed with how he conducted himself, not giving him the contempt he deserved. Honestly, I'm not surprised because Morgan has always done this. He's always pandered to the likes of Donald Trump. Of course, he'll criticize him, but I think it's very cynical the way he basically grovels to Trump. It's pathetic. I understand why he does it. It's playing to Trump's base. Um, if you'd seen the interview from start to finish, you might understand why. After all, we know how he acted on the internet. He's not only a demagogue, but he would be a cybergog as well. On a similar note, Elon Musk, while he is planning to buy Twitter, I would be very disappointed with him for bringing Donald Trump back on the platform for freedom of speech reasons. I agree. I mean, I think the right got into a bit of a hissy fit over this one, and this is why. Of course, freedom of speech is sacrosanct, and I do think that platforms, social media platforms, are inconsistent. Having said that, you cannot have a situation where the former president of the United States, someone in his position, could just tell lies without any sort of blowback, without any sort of consequences for that. I think it is dangerous and reckless. Um, And I am not a free speech absolutist. I never have been. I think if someone tells lies, if they make controversial statements, if they're inciting violence, they should be held to account. And I do think too many conservatives and right wingers frame it as a free speech issue. Elon Musk, I think, he's another person I've mixed views on. Considering he's the richest man in the world, again, there's sort of a snooty side to him. Not snooty, he's sort of a bit smug. There's a smugness about Elon Musk I don't like. I mean, the interesting thing is the mega rich Musk, Bezos, they're actually quite frugal in their lifestyle. But there's a certain there's an arrogance there, unquestionably, as you would probably expect from someone in that position. I don't see it from Bill Gates. I don't actually see the same. It's hard to explain. I can't put it in words, but I know that he has autism. I don't know if there's something in that because sometimes I don't know. And toxic. I don't mean any disrespect here because I know you've mentioned that you have it, but based on what friends have told me, sometimes there's a lack of self awareness. Now, I know Elon Musk has that problem. Um, he's clearly very clever, extremely successful, but sometimes he comes across as quite conceited and full of himself and just a bit sarcastic and dismissive. And I don't know, I quite can't quite put my finger on it, but I don't entirely warm to him. Watching Trust speaking, she reminds me of Ted Heath. That's interesting. That's an interesting observation. It'll be interesting to see if she is another Ted Heath. Heath, of course, is in contrast to Boris Johnson, is widely reviled now in Tory circles. I think it's fair to say he was a pretty mediocre prime minister, below average even. Um, I mean, Heath really doesn't have a good legacy. He's the prime minister that brought us into the European Union, so he's unpopular with Brexiteers for that. In Northern Ireland, he was the prime minister who sent troops in to deal with the troubles, although at the time it was probably the right thing to do. And of course, there was all speculation on the allegations against him. But Heath was not a great communicator, not compared to Harold Wilson. So Truss might have a similar problem. That's an interesting comparison, actually. The absolute worst example of ghosting, by the way, is that SSS Sniper Wolf. There's a grotesque excuse for a person. He has ghosted a girl who's physically dying of cancer. My goodness. I'm not familiar with him, but if that's true, that's disgusting. What's the story? Was he dating her? Yeah, I mean, my experience of dating, it's horrendous. It's so sickening that YouTubers had called her out justifiably. Um, oh, so sorry, SS Sniper's a woman? I'm sorry, I really don't know anything about that, so I'll need to check it out. With the Tory party pandering to the rich and powerful, it could be safe to say that the European Research Group could also have a role in this as well. No question about it. I mean, Truss actually was a Remainer, then a converted Brexiteer. I mean, to be honest, I wish that was all done with, but there's the Northern Ireland Protocol. It's going to rumble on. She'll be the fourth Prime Minister to get into the whole Brexit thing. It's one thing that items of value can drive most people crazy, but once it starts to escalate, it can have negative consequences in not only businesses but also on a political scale. Sorry, guys, I need to take a little breath here. I've been reading a lot. I'm going to check out that person you mentioned about ghosting. I'm still going through this. A woman who's ghosted me 2 months and counting now. Just on that point, though, I um I did read that ghosters inevitably come back. Now, if that happens, I need to know what I'm going to say to her. I'm not going to let her off the hook, but I want to be assertive. But apparently, they come back when they get bored or they want something. Um, it's a difficult thing. It's one of the hardest things I've been through because there was no red flags, there was no rejection. It was tough. It is tough. I was researching about tyrants a while back, and I had stumbled across a benevolent dictator article on Wikipedia. That's a very interesting concept because there is variation actually among autocrats. You get the sort of archetypal tin pot tyrant like the Kims in North Korea or Idi Amin in Uganda. But you get other authoritarians who are not quite as openly thuggish, but they're still authoritarian and they preside over authoritarian states. Um, so there is actually variation among dictators. I mean, take for example Xi Jinping. He's a dictator. He presides over a vile regime, but there isn't really much known about his personal life, and there's no, as far as we know, eccentric personality quirks with him that you would get with some of the more colorful dictators. Putin, in many ways, is a more archetypal dictator. Um, Aside from the more corrupt and malignant dictators, which value all sorts of control, benign dictators would be interested in all sorts of democracy. What will be your views on these type of dictators? Well, obviously, there's a contradiction. Wherever you have dictatorship, you can't have true democracy, but you can have a sort of democracy within the set system. I mean, what Gorbachev was proposing with perestroika, Gorbachev was definitely inclined to democracy, but he was still a communist and he was the last leader of that system. So I'm not sure if Gorbachev can correctly be titled a dictator. He was, in the sense, he wasn't elected to power, but and Aaron, you mentioned Lee Kuan Yew. I just had that in mind. In Singapore, the sort of system they have there is sort of a benevolent dictatorship. Not just Lee Kuan Yew, his successors as well, was arguably a benign despot whose legacy was broadly positive. Benign despotism or enlightened dictatorship outside of monarchical states are a rarity. Yeah, I mean, most Singaporeans, I think, consider him to have a good legacy. Singaporean prime ministers have the highest salary in the world, but Singapore has pretty high qualities of life. They're very low crime rates, very clean. I remember when Lee Kuan Yew died. Actually, I did say something about sort of what I felt was the whitewashing of some of the more questionable human rights situation, particularly the issues around free speech. And this young woman asked me, she was Singaporean, and she asked my opinion about this. And she was open minded. And we've become friends actually because of this debate that we had. Um, of course, the word dictator itself comes from the Romans, and most of the Roman emperors were dictators. I do think there is such a thing as a benevolent dictator, but I'm not sure if it could ever work in a country like the UK because we already have a multi-party state. So if Liz Truss was to suddenly decide to become a dictator, she'd have to abolish Labour, Liberal Democrats, Greens, SNP, and the outcry would be so fierce that she would be forced from office. So, well, it just wouldn't happen in our mechanism, and that's a good thing. I do think, though, you can have such a thing. Let me put it another way. We're talking about benign dictators. Let's talk about authoritarian Democrats, if we could put it that way. I do think a leader needs to be strong and assertive and sometimes force their own way. Thatcher is an example of this, maybe Tony Blair as well. They're obviously Democrats in the sense they were elected to power and they come from a democratic country, but they were more presidential in their style. And, you knew who was boss. Within Labour, Blair was dominant. Within the Tories, Thatcher was dominant. So there was very much that sort of presidential style of leadership, which I don't think is entirely a bad thing. Um, so it's an interesting subject. Obviously, if you had a situation where the free press was shut down, where opposition figures were jailed, that inevitably goes down a dark path. But I do think sometimes you need a bit more assertiveness. For example, one of the flaws with democracy, dare I say it, and I'm a Democrat, but one of the flaws with democracy is that, and this is one of the criticisms that are made from more totalitarian states, nothing gets done. Because by allowing debate and allowing these multiple opinions, it's kind of this constant situation of, I mean, I remember I showed a Chinese student of mine Prime Minister's questions to give him an idea of our system, and he said, "Oh, he didn't really like it because he couldn't get his head around the fact that the opposition was there to hold the government to account." Um, but it is one thing about dictatorships, and it's one reason they survive is because they promise stability, and on some level they deliver that, but it's not always true. So we need to take it with caution. This idea that dictatorship delivers stability. The reason I say that is because eventually people get fed up with it. So eventually that instability arises from the arrogance of the said dictatorship. I mean, I am a Democrat, but I do think leaders should have a degree of forcefulness and certainly power. Otherwise, nothing gets done. On something like crime and justice, I mean, I'll actually mention this point. I wrote to the Ministry of Justice recently, and their whole thing about accountability of judges was, oh, we can't interfere because of the independence of the judiciary. The problem is, if you put it to judges, they'll say, oh, we're only following guidelines. So there's a real problem with lack of accountability. And sometimes I do think if we had a prime minister who was forceful and said, this is going to change, and to hell with the critics, it might be something radical like that is sort of needed, even if it requires a degree of populism. I don't know. It's definitely a very, very important issue, though. Just scrolling down. Considering you're tough on crime, Nathan, what would be the differences between a sociopath and a psychopath? It's a shame that the definitions were contradicted. Well, I should say my views on crime are what they are, but I'm not a criminologist. Um, I suppose a psychopath is more prone to violence. I mean, this is just my guessing. I really don't know. I would imagine a psychopath is more prone to violence, whereas a sociopath is just has contempt for other people's rights. So, for example, a sociopath might be a burglar who doesn't use violence. A psychopath might be some thug. Like, for example, I heard a case of a elderly Sikh man, a priest, who was attacked in Manchester recently for absolutely no reason. The people who attacked him were probably psychopaths. But I want to be careful about getting into that realm because uh, it's not my field. But I know my views on crime for sure. I think sometimes we can get too much into the psychology of it, and that can serve as a deflection from the actions. Um, yep, she's a girl. That's interesting. The username just sounded more masculine. What's the story? Were they dating? Were they a gay couple? And she ghosted the girl. I'm going to check that out. Let's see. I'm scrolling back a bit. SSS Sniper Wolf. Right, I'll see if I can find out more about that story. Yeah, I mean, ghosting is pure cowardice, and it's bad in any situation, but with the possible exception of fleeing an abusive relationship. But to do it to someone who's dying, that's beyond despicable. And as tough as my situation's been, I know it could be worse. I've heard of people who've got married, and the next day or the next week, their husband or their wife disappears. It's despicable. I mean, the abuse that can cause someone, it's thoroughly despicable. He was the least communist. Sutherland, welcome. First time I've seen your comment. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I saw a bizarre advertisement with Gorbachev yesterday. It's from the late 90s, I think it's 1998. Mikhail Gorbachev, last leader of the Soviet Union, advertising Pizza Hut. It's a bizarre ad. I mean, he comes in with his little granddaughter and he sits down, and these people are debating his legacy. The older people are saying, oh, he's divided the country. The young guy saying he's given us freedom. And in the end, the old babushka woman, it's set in Russia, says he's given us many things, including Pizza Hut. And then they're all like, hail Gorbachev. And he sort of nods. And it's bizarre. I mean, you could never in a million years see that with someone like Leonid Brezhnev or Yuri Andropov or Nikita Khrushchev. It was so bizarre. Um, Definitely one of the strangest ads I've ever seen. Of course, it was banned in Russia, but apparently the pay got for that went to the Gorbachev Foundation. Ghosting is awful, causes all sorts of emotional pain and mental health too. Being blocked too. If the woman comes back, hopefully she properly apologizes or has a good explanation. Yeah, the most hurtful thing about it is, if she came across as blasé, like she didn't really care at the time, then I'd think, okay, she was never that invested in it. But the most hurtful thing about this is she really gave me the impression she was interested. She said she was excited to speak to me and I was a great guy. And honestly, I don't wish this on anyone. It's emotionally very, it's like having part of yourself ripped away. Because here's the most difficult thing about ghosting. You have allowed yourself to get into a frame of mind where you imagine yourself with that person. Now, in my case, she is based in Edinburgh, ostensibly. At the time, I happened to be watching the old series of Star Trek. Now, she has no connection to Star Trek, but what's happened is because I was watching that old series on YouTube at the time, sorry, Netflix, I can't watch that now without thinking about her. And there's no reason for it. She's not a Trekkie or anything like that, but it's association. And to me, I mean, she was a very cute girl, um, Malaysian, very beautiful, feminine, just my type. And she just disappears. It's devastating. You know, I've really done research on this. I tried finding out. I've googled her name. Um, I've tried to find out more information, all to a dead end. But the thing is, you know, they say that ghosters do eventually come back. And I cannot be living in hope that, oh, well, I'll open up my emails and she'll be there, because she won't be. It could be a month from now, it could be 6 months from now, which I think it all depends on what she says. If she's very matter of fact that, hey, how's it going? And she acts like nothing has happened, I'm going to tell her where to go. But if she's genuinely apologetic and she really, really shows me that she's willing to make up for it, God help me, but I still have feelings for her. I'd be prepared to do that. But she would have to prove it to me. I think Count Dunkula is losing his mind if he thinks that Ted Kaczynski's views on technology are right, especially when considering how much better technology has made our lives. Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know his views, but I mean, here's the thing: technology can be frustrating. I get that. I've been in the situation where a computer has been slow, and you try getting customer help. It's appallingly bad. I do think one problem with technology is a disconnect between people who use it and those running these big companies. You know, have you ever been in a situation where you're trying to get help and it's an automated service? It's incredibly frustrating. This computer I'm using now is much better than my last one, so at least I don't have that sort of stress. And you know, I use technology a lot, but you're right. Um, where are we? Sorry, just trying to get. Yeah, Carl, you're right. This idea that we just discard all technology is preposterous. I'm not sure what Count Duckula is proposing. Of course, it's a bit hypocritical. I mean, he has a successful YouTube channel. Without technology, he wouldn't have his subscribers, and he wouldn't be one of the better known YouTubers out there. So it's a bit hypocritical. I mean, that's why I could never fully denounce YouTube. Although I've had my frustrations with YouTube, I have a big problem with their monetization procedure. I could never say I'm against YouTube because I'd be a hypocrite. I'm using their platform. But yeah, there are areas where they could greatly improve life for their creators. Okay. I might check out his video on that actually. You've got me intrigued now. Funnily enough, there are, just scrolling down, there are also comedians who stood up to the gun lobby, and my personal favourite would be Russell Howard. That's good to hear. He's British, though, isn't he? So, in a sense, there's less of an impetus for British comedians to do so because we don't quite have that problem except in our big cities. There was a great moment, for example, when he was showing footage of a gun store owner with made up. Um, It gets even better. There is a parody video on YouTube related to Peppa Pig called Peppa Pigette, and I can promise you now I was pissing myself laughing. I'll have to check that out. Talking of comedy, there's a lady who's a comedian. She does a wonderful Liz Truss. I mean, her impressions are incredible. She looks like Liz Truss, and yeah, it's very, very, very good parodies. I forget her name now though, but if you type in Liz Truss parody, she should come up. She's very, very good at it, and she even looks like Truss. What are your opinions on Tony Blair? For all his faults, I cannot help but think he was the right sort of political leader when looking at what we have recently. Tony Blair fascinates me. You know, he's like Marmite. He's a bit like Thatcher. For some people, he will always be a very, very controversial figure because of Iraq. And I do think Iraq was a massive, massive foreign policy blunder. It deeply damaged the image of this country. It was an invasion after all. And Bush and Blair just did not plan out the post war situation, the quagmire that it would cause. And it's the fact that it had no links to 9/11. Having said that, Saddam was a brutal genocidal dictator, and there are Iraqis who concede that getting rid of him in itself was not a bad thing. There's a lot to say about Tony Blair. Incidentally, there was a film with Ewan McGregor called The Ghostwriter, and it's sort of, you could tell it's loosely based on Tony Blair. Pierce Brosnan as former British Prime Minister Andrew Lang, who had a controversial war, and the ghostwriter Ewan McGregor is writing about him. Um, so yeah, Blair fascinates me. Tony Blair was the man that got me into politics because I became politically coming of age when he was prime minister. When I was at university, circa 2004, 2005. So Tony Blair will always be a fascinating figure to me. I think there should be a biopic film made about him. On the plus side, the longest period is sustained economic growth, some major social policies such as the introduction of the minimum wage, um, all sorts of things. Guys, I really need to use the bathroom. I don't usually do this, but I really do need to go. So hold the thoughts. I'm going to come back to some of the comments. Stand by. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I really do need to go, but I want to address the other questions. Please don't go anywhere. This live stream is not over. I'm just using the bathroom. So stand by. I will be back because I want to address the other questions. Some very good questions here. So hold by and I'll be back in 2 minutes. Hi, folks. So I hope everyone's still here. I don't usually do that, but I really did need to go. So DMD back on Tony Blair. Yeah, I'm fascinated by the man. I have a lot of books on Blair. I mentioned the positive things, sustained growth, some important social programs he introduced, peace in Northern Ireland, peace in Sierra Leone. In Kosovo, despite the controversy with Iraq, Blair is very popular. I do think sometimes people in this country have blinkers on with Tony Blair and they forget actually this is a man who won three general elections, electorally the most successful Labour Prime Minister ever, even above Attlee and Wilson. Um, and I see him as a political giant. I don't mind saying that. I think he was a very, very skilled political operator. The negative side, there was the rise of the Big Brother state. 90 days detention was controversial for good reason. Also, some of Blair's statements recently, he wants a reintroduction of masks this winter. That's just absurd. But I would never downplay Tony Blair. He's a very, I find him a very interesting character. You know, he went to the third way of politics. He knew that Labour had to go to the centre to get elected. And I think Starmer, he cannot be Tony Blair, but nor can he be Jeremy Corbyn. I think this sort of leaving aside his pandering to woke ideology, um, I would say that Starmer's hitting the right notes at the moment. But anyway, that's perhaps for another video. I want to address some of the other comments here. But yeah, suffice to say, Tony Blair, very important figure. And I just think he should get a more fair assessment in this country than he does. Toxic. It gets even better. There's a party, I mentioned that. Fun fact, if you directly compare the UK islands, namely Northern Ireland and England, to the Galapagos, you will actually see that they're closely similar in terms of shape and proximity. Looks like the UK is another cousin. I did not know that, I must admit. I'm going to check out the Galapagos. Um, I saw something about the Galapagos yesterday. Apparently, when Charles Darwin went there, he noticed that the actual climate on each individual island was somewhat different. And so that explained the evolutionary difference island to island. Didn't know that. I know that the sovereignty of Ecuador, although it's a long way from there. What be your thoughts on Matt Hancock of the Tory party? I'm honestly terrified of him because if you pay attention to his face during interviews, he's sitting there with a massive grin on his face. It's almost like he's ready to kill someone. Uh, I don't have strong views on Matt Hancock simply because he's someone of the past. He resigned from Johnson's government over that affair. I know after that he tried to do a charity run, and on Instagram he was bombarded with abuse, which was a little bit uncalled for. But then again, it's a perception of double standards. Honestly, I have no strong views on Matt Hancock other than the fact that he was yet another Tory employing double standards. But I don't think he's in Truss's cabinet, is he? I'd be surprised if he was. Well, but incidentally, on her cabinet, apparently it's the first time ever that there hasn't been a a white man on the front bench. So, Prime Minister's a woman. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly of African descent, Kwasi Kwarteng, Chancellor of African descent, and Home Secretary is Asian woman, Suella Braverman. So, yeah, that's just a bit of history. Um, let's see here. What would be your thoughts on net neutrality as well as the FCC scandal back in 2017 remove that? You'll have to recap me on that one. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to. In terms of his track record, I think Ajit Pai is a pure example of a corporate figure who happens to be a gremlin. Again, I don't know the guy, but there's a lot of corporate rats out there, no question about it. The mark on his head was pizza sauce. Are you talking about Gorbachev, Sir Fallon? it's, I think it was a birthmark, to be fair, but oh, the mark on. Oh, I'm with you. Sorry, Pizza Hut. Yeah, the mark on his head. That's yeah. It's interesting. Younger pictures of Gorbachev, it wasn't that prominent. It's more when he was leader. While I'm returning to the subject of nutty conspiracy theories, Flat Earth is the one I find most laughable. I watched a Netflix documentary about them, and honestly, I almost feel sorry for them. The thing is, it's one of the most absurd ones. The problem is, it's easy to laugh at, but it crosses over into more murky territory, like alt-right type conspiracy theories, and in of itself, it's fairly harmless. But when they start getting into the more birtherism stuff, and it's pathetic. But yeah, it is pretty absurd. No matter how many attempts to verify this to be the case, it utterly feels miserable for them. I had a colleague who was a conspiracy theorist, and the go to is always, "Oh, but you're trying to delegitimize my view by calling it a conspiracy theory." But it's not. That's what it is. It's a theory that suggests a conspiracy. So it's not in of itself a smear. It just is what it is. But they never. My biggest issue with conspiracy theories, and I think one of my subscribers mentioned this, um, was that they don't check their own sources. I mean, they'll say, "Oh, but you're a fool for listening to the mainstream media." What scares me about conspiracy theories is the amount of influence they have. I mean, if you look at their little platforms, they're echo chambers. Anyone who dares to say, well, actually, maybe this is just a journalist doing their job. No, but you're pandering to the BBC or CNN or mainstream narrative, whatever it is. What they won't do is question their own sources. I mean, they'll say, oh, but they've all got an agenda, and maybe they do, but they won't say, well, my source, how about checking my source? Because they think their source is the truth. So they won't employ their own standards. The truth is, there are some things that transcend beyond science, and that's what they should understand. Yeah. Tony Blair, domestically amazing. Foreign policy, questionable. I'd agree with that, Seville. If, the problem with Blair, he went too far on humanitarian intervention, or let's say intervention. Iraq was a complete catastrophe. And I honestly think, had it been not been for that, um, Afghanistan is, I get annoyed when people just read off this list of foreign conflicts as if they're all the same. People forget when the intervention in Afghanistan happened in 2001, there was actually broad UN support for that, unlike Iraq. So they're not the same conflict, and it's misguided to say they are. The Taliban gave safe haven to Al Qaeda, therefore, it was directly linked to 9/11. Iraq wasn't. So I get a bit annoyed when people say, oh, the West, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, as if they're all the same. The West did not begin the war in Syria. Bashar Assad did, propped up by Russia. But yeah, foreign policy questionable. I'd agree with that. The other big problem with Tony Blair, for all his focus on humanitarian intervention and human rights, he did cozy up to some dictators. So it wasn't. I mean, his Faith Foundation and his other post prime ministerial work, some of it has definitely. Apparently, for example, one of those Central Asian dictators wanted Tony Blair as an advisor. Now, they're some of the most corrupt, brutal regimes on earth. So Blair's actual record in standing up for human rights is not that consistent. But domestic, yeah, I think he was a very strong prime minister. Even Tories like Michael Gove has acknowledged it. And I just wish there was a bit of a more fair assessment of Tony Blair. I will need to go soon to watch Ajax versus Glasgow Rangers in the Champions League. Um, That's fine. Thank you for your time, DMD. By the way, guys, very soon, in fact, before you go, DMD, I want to advertise something. I will come back to these questions, but I made a video about this. Okay, I don't usually do this, but if you're interested in newspapers and magazines for sale, I have an eBay account. I'm going to show you some stuff here because I'm less likely to be sanctioned this way than in the video. National Geographic, a special on Vikings. The Economist Christmas special. The Economist Red Moon Rising. So I have all these magazines for sale on eBay. There's a double issue of Theresa May. This is today's Sun. That's Liz Truss and the Queen yesterday. I did make a video about this, but here's the thing. It's very, very hard as a seller. I'm much more familiar as a buyer. If you guys are interested at all in buying this stuff, I've got very competitive prices, free delivery, UK only, but free delivery. Please check out my eBay site. Of other historic papers, Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder free. Um, the coup against Boris Johnson earlier this year. Let's see, what do we have here? Joe Biden, his inauguration in the Daily Mirror. I'm really trying to get this stuff sold, and I'll tell you what, I can't put a discount into the system, but what I'll do, if any of you guys want to buy this stuff, whatever the mark price is on eBay, I will lower that price. If you check it out, send me a message. For example, if I've got $5.99, I'll give you it for $4.99, free delivery. I don't usually do this, but really, and I promise I didn't make this live stream just for this purpose, but really, I want this stuff sold. I have a lot of metros. Now, they're free to begin with, but I'm paying for the delivery. So, what do we have here? The big squeeze. There's all sorts of things. I mean, please check out my eBay site. Even if you don't want to buy, please check out if anyone you know does. No one's commenting on this yet. Um, but please check it out. I hope this doesn't come across as spam. There's one on the Jubilee. Like I say, competitive prices, free delivery. If, like me, you collect historic editions, please do check this stuff out. If you message me and say I'm one of your subscribers on YouTube, just for you guys and girls, I will knock off part of the price. I can't do it as an automatic discount because I'm not sure how to do that. But what I'll do is I'll put the price down. If you look at the item, say Nathan, I'm interested in this, I'll knock off the price for you. If you, there's another one, the Times. This was the Putin Biden summit. So I have a lot of stuff here. Please check it out. Okay, I'm going to address some of the questions again, and I'll round this up soon. I'll buy The Economist. Okay, Savalan, excellent. Right. Well, you know what? We may as well talk about this here. I don't know if I've even listed these yet, but if you tell me which one you want, let's see. Thank you. I didn't even think this would work, but if you're serious, okay. So, The Economist. We have Red Moon Rising. It's January the 12th, 2019, and it's about will China dominate science? Okay, I can sell this to you for $4.99. Okay, usually it would be $6.99, but can we say $4.99? Would you be willing to do that? Free delivery, £4.99. And I trust you in the UK. I can't ship internationally because really the price would be too much. But if you want to buy this, $4.99, it's yours. And as you can see, it's brand new. I'll have to list it just for the sake of buying it through eBay. But what I'll do that straight after this video. I'll list it $4.99. And please buy it. Yeah, you can pay by direct debits or cash. I think that should be an option. Or I assume this is the one you wanted as opposed to this one, the Christmas special, Christmas double issue. I've got other magazines as well if you're interested. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make this live stream a pitch, but I'm going to check out. Just hold by 1 minute. I might have some other magazines. And, no pressure here. It's just that, okay, just bear with me. There's another copy of The Week. That's the Current Affairs magazine. They have great caricatures. I have lots of National Geographics. They are heavier, so It's the cost to send them is more. Stonehenge, the end of blindness, the photo ark. This is endangered animal species. American Civil War, and Tomb Raiders about Egyptology. If any of those catch your interest, guys and girls, please let me know. With the National Geographics, I will have to put a higher price on it, maybe at least $7.99, simply because this is heavier, and if it's free delivery, also eBay takes a portion off. So Savalan, if you want to buy that, please go to eBay if you have an account. I'll try and give you a link. I haven't actually listed it yet, but I assume that's the one that you want. I'm just scrolling down. I'm not sure what's happening with the comments here. Sorry, I've got so much stuff here. Like I say, it's brand new. There's no tears or stains or anything like that. What I'll do is I'll post it second class, but I'll take a photograph so to give you confidence. If you just give me your clear postal address, please do give me a review as well if it arrives. Is this the one that you want, Savalin? Please give me some. Is that a yes? Is this the one that you want? This is the reason I'm selling it is simply I have the same copy. But if that's the correct one, by the way, the issues: the world's least successful president, Putin threatens Belarus, Pakistan impoverished by its army. Okay, good man. I'll sell this to you on eBay. I'm going to list that straight after this live stream, so I'll round this up soon. Give me 10 minutes because it takes a little bit of time to list it. I will have to put it as a general message, but I know that you're buying it. And I'll post it hopefully tomorrow. Please give me feedback when it arrives. If there's any problems, let me know. $4.99 for you. Usually I do the Economist a bit more, like $5.99, but I'm pleasantly surprised that you've agreed. So I'm going to list that afterwards. Please buy it. What I'll do, I'll send it second class by Royal Mail, probably in a manila envelope. I think its weight should take that. And free delivery, and I'll send you pictures so you know it's been delivered. And yeah, please let me know when it arrives. And thank you very much. I appreciate that. If you give me a good review, that also helps in buyer credibility. If you like any of the other magazines as well, by the way, any of the weeks like these, do let me know, because the more sales I get, the more I have a lot there. I'm going to post more later. Okay, guys, I'm going to wrap this up because I want to do that for Savalan's benefit. And you're in the UK, aren't you? Because I can only deliver in the UK. Okay, just quickly address some of the other questions, and I'll go straight to eBay to do that. Savlan, I may need to message you if there's any issues. Okay. Do you think a democratic state with an inbuilt demographic electoral majority, which makes it an effective one-party state such as Ulster from the 20s to 60s, or Japan since the 50s, is a type of dictatorship? Japan's an interesting example because they've had the Liberal Democratic Party almost consistently. The thing is, it is a multi-party democracy. The other parties aren't outlawed. I think it could be a cultural thing. For example, the Japanese just like consistency. And maybe it's just the fact that the Liberal Democratic Party has delivered. They did have in more recent years, some of their prime ministers were from other parties. I think not Shinzo Abe, but I've lost track because they've had a lot of prime ministers. But there was one leader, Mister, not the current guys from Abe's party, Yumio Fushida, or Kishida actually. I wouldn't call it dictatorship. I mean, some people say that we have a tandem dictatorship where it's always Labour or Tory. It's an interesting question. Maybe that's for another video. I'm going to wrap this one up soon, but it's a good question. Dankula said it himself that it was hypocritical to say that he agrees with Ted while being a YouTuber, but doesn't follow up with anything else. It just moves on to being about how right he was. Count Dankula is quite entertaining. I might go to his channel just to check that one out. What were your thoughts on the killing of Alexander Dugin's daughter? Well, morally speaking, I'm not going to applaud her death, but at the same time, I'm not going to cry about it. She was an ultranationalist like her father. She literally supported the killing of Ukrainian civilians. I'm not going to cry crocodile tears and pretend that I'm sad about it, but it's obviously not a good situation to have effectively civilians killed in the Russian capital. In terms of Ukrainians being responsible, it's possible. It's possible the Ukrainians are thinking, well, our country has been under this relentless bombardment. Let's get a bit of our own back and have these covert operations within Russia. If that is the case, they need to be very, very careful about it, because if they were found out, say some Ukrainian operatives were captured, the problem is there's a lot of countries in the world right now. I mean, Europe and the West is pretty much united when it comes to this. Well, unfortunately, there are still people buying into the Russian lies. And if they manage to sort of put out propaganda, oh, this young woman was killed by these Ukrainian fascists, it would help Russian propaganda. But I wouldn't put anything past the Kremlin. Apparently, someone released a photo that showed that, she didn't have a mark on her body, which would be very strange for a victim of an explosion. I don't know if you guys know, but back in 1999, there were apartment bombings in Russia. Major, major incident, hundreds of people killed and wounded. Putin used this as an excuse to launch the Second Chechen War. Many insiders have said that was basically, I don't want to say inside job and sound like a conspiracy theorist. The thing is, Russia is so corrupt, it is very, very plausible. I have a book which is literally called Blowing Up Russia. It's banned in Russia. One of the authors was Alexander, I was going to say Lukashenko, it's Alexander Litvinenko, dissident who was poisoned in London. He was one of the authors of that book. It's banned in Russia. So I wouldn't put anything past the Kremlin. If it was the Ukrainians, I wouldn't have made her the main target. I would have made her father the target. Certainly, nationalistic mouthpieces are very dangerous. But yeah, that's basically my view. I'm not going to cry about it, but I think probably it wouldn't be the best strategy of the Ukrainians to do that, if indeed they did. Salvador, talking about foreign policy, UK has spent 0.2% of its GDP in supporting Ukraine. Um, yeah, I mean, the Ukrainian First Lady mentioned that she had this interview about the cost of living. My concern is people will get war weary and they'll start to say, why are you supporting the Ukrainians at this time? To me, that would be victim blaming. The Ukrainians did not ask for this war. I think this all comes back to Putin. He launched the war, and so much of it does come down. I'm not going to say solely the war, but so much of it does come down to that decision. Um, I'm surprised it's only 0.2% actually. I would have thought in terms of defense it would be even higher than that. But it goes to show that it's not as high as people think. And I think it's not just a moral question that it's the right thing to do. I think it's actually practical because Russia threatens all of us. And let's not forget, Russia already attacked this country at Salisbury. So supporting Ukraine isn't just morally the right thing to do. It's actually practical because, as the Ukrainians have pointed out, Russia has threatened the whole of Europe. Some people have taken this attitude of, oh, it's their problem. And they're not a NATO country, so why are we being so forceful? But look at Russia's overtures to Finland and Sweden simply for joining NATO. They threatened them. The irony here is Russia says it's being surrounded. They're pushing countries towards NATO. But there's a lot more to say about that subject. I do want to round this up soon. In fairness, conspiracy theorists represent a tiny minority, and constant belittling by others seems to me like people looking for easy pickings to project their own pseudo intellectual image. Um, do you mean belittling of conspiracy theorists? Yeah, I mean, what I would say, if that's what you're driving at, in other words, it doesn't take a genius to point out the obvious, it takes a pseudo intellectual to point out the obvious. I'm always a little bit wary. I don't totally rubbish conspiracy theorists on the grounds that not everything they say is nuts. Take the Kennedy assassination, for example. There are important questions about that. Many Americans don't believe the Warren Commission. So I'd be a little bit cautious about totally dismissing everything they're saying. That could backfire, especially if it later transpires that governments have hid things. Um, Princess Diana's another one. There are some things about that that do not add up. And purely in terms of interest, let's face it, conspiracy theorists are interesting. People love to read into it, but there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. But that's probably for a video in its own right. It's a very interesting subject. Is that enough? You've just retracted the message. I'll buy The Economist. In other words, it doesn't take. Okay, I don't see any more comments. Savalan, thank you very much. I'm going to list it after this video. I don't want to take advantage of your generosity in buying that, but if you are interested in current affairs, like I say, what I could do is I could put 2 weeks together. Like say, for example, these two for $5 or $6.99. The National Geographics I do need to put more because they're heavier, and hence delivery costs me more, and eBay takes a portion out. But this is a particularly good edition. It has a big spread out on. Check this out. The Viking World. I don't want to tear the material, but to be honest, I've got all those National Geographics because when my grandfather passed away, he had them in his house, and I just happen to have these particular editions. But anyway, Savalin, I'll sell that to you afterwards. Please do log into your eBay, say about 10 minutes from now. If there's any issues, if you're not buying it, I'll have to follow up on that because you said that you're interested. And $4.99 is less than I would usually put on that. So, but please leave me your address. If you could buy it immediately, I'll send it tomorrow. It's too late now. The post office will be closed, but I'll send it tomorrow. Second class. I'll take a picture for you. And thank you very much. I trust that you are based in the UK. And any of you other guys, if you're interested in anything I'm selling, please check out my eBay. I made a video. My last video was specifically about this, but I'm not sure if YouTube will let me do that. So before they take it down, please check that out. See you again soon, and let me know what you think about Count Donkey, the video. Please remind me in our next live stream because I may not be able to have the time to. I'm going to be busy today, but I will check that out. And Savalin, please check out your eBay account after this. As long as you buy that. Like I say, I've got historic newspapers as well. So that's the Queen's Jubilee, Biden's inauguration, things like that. But I'll sell you that Economist. Thanks a lot. Okay, guys, this has been a good session. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and look after yourselves. And Savalin, I will see you on eBay. Thanks a lot, people. Bye for now.